She thought she was sneaking away for a weekend of lies. What she didn't know was the beach house wasn't hers to hide in, and the moment they stepped inside, we were already there, waiting. Before we delve into the story, tell us if you've ever been cheated on. Let us know in the comment section. Kindly leave a like, share, and subscribe to our channel to support us. Now, let's go. I didn't find out from a message. I didn't catch her in the act. No lipstick on a collar. No whispering phone calls. It was quieter than that, colder, even. It started with a charge on the card. I was reviewing our joint statement one night, just a routine glance through our finances while she was at her sister's for the weekend, or so she claimed. A $1,340 charge from Coastal Breeze Villas caught my attention. I blinked. That was the name of a management company I knew very well, because I owned the property they handled. Our beach house. My beach house. The one she hadn't visited in over 4 months. The one I'd kept in my name only, for reasons I didn't realize would matter until now. At first, I thought it was some mix-up. Maybe she'd planned a surprise getaway for us, an attempt to fix what was left between us. But she hadn't mentioned a thing. And we weren't in the kind of place where grand gestures made sense anymore. We were distant. Hollow. Living like polite strangers under the same roof. I tried not to overthink it, but my gut didn't listen. Something wasn't right. I pulled up the confirmation email linked to the booking. She hadn't even bothered to use a different address. Same email. Same login. She was either that arrogant or that certain I would never check. That was when I started digging. I checked the reservation details. 2 guests. 1 king bed. Her name on the primary. No mention of me anywhere. My jaw clenched, not out of surprise, but out of recognition. This wasn't the first time I'd seen signs. Just the first time I had proof. All the long showers with her phone always just out of reach, the random weekends away, the times she came home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. I had chalked it all up to the stress of marriage, the exhaustion. I told myself not to be paranoid, that I was imagining things. I wasn't. I opened our shared calendar. She had blocked out that weekend as family time and told me she'd be with her sister for a much-needed recharge. That's when it clicked. She hadn't just lied. She'd used my money, my house, and my time to disappear with someone else. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen, not angry. Not yet. Just still. There's a strange kind of silence that fills you when truth walks into the room. It doesn't knock. It doesn't explain itself. It just sits down and dares you to look it in the eye. I did. And then I opened another browser tab. Search for a name I hadn't said aloud in weeks. Darren H. I didn't know much about him except that he was the kind of guy who laughed too hard at her jokes and posted cryptic gym selfies like they were personality traits. I'd seen him once in a group photo on her phone and felt a twinge. I didn't say anything then. I should have. But now I needed more. I found his social media, wide open. His latest post? A captionless beach shot. My porch in the background. My chair. My view. That's when I picked up the phone. But I didn't call her. I called his wife. Her name was Meredith. We'd never spoken before, but I knew who she was. Small-town connections. People whisper. People watch. I introduced myself calmly, told her I had a few questions, delicate ones, and asked if she had time to meet. She hesitated, confused, but agreed. We met at a neutral cafe the next morning, both of us guarded, both of us holding cups of coffee that neither of us drank. I showed her the receipt, the photos, the house booking, and then I saw it in her eyes, the same shift that had passed through me the night before, that calm, cold realization that something sacred had been mocked behind our backs. She didn't cry. I didn't yell. We just sat there, 2 strangers united by betrayal, and quietly agreed on one thing. They shouldn't get to walk away with it. Not like this. So we made a plan. Nothing messy. Nothing loud. Just surgical. Precise. I offered the place. I said, it's already booked. Let them walk in thinking they're safe. Let them believe they've fooled us. She looked at me for a long moment, and then nodded. Let's be waiting. The funny thing about betrayal is that once you see it clearly, you begin to notice all the places it left fingerprints. It's like someone suddenly turned on a black light and the truth was splattered everywhere. On her late returns from yoga, on the way she clutched her phone tighter when I walked in the room, even in the way she kissed me goodnight, lips barely grazing. like a habit she couldn't quite let go of but no longer met. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The signs had been there for months. I just hadn't wanted to name them. There was that one night, back in December, when she came home an hour later than planned. Her cheeks flushed, her story practiced, but off by half a beat. Dinner ran long, she'd said, claiming her co-worker's birthday had turned into drinks. But I remembered clearly. She had left with no gift, no mention of a celebration until that very moment. Her coat smelled faintly of cologne I didn't own, and there were small things too. Her lipstick freshly applied, not faded as it should have been after hours at a restaurant. She'd laughed when I pointed it out. Laughed like I was being insecure. I wasn't. I was being lied to. Then there were the weekends. She began inventing reasons to be away, impromptu girls' trips, solo retreats for mental clarity. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. Because when you love someone, you try to trust them past your own instincts. You bury your doubts under the idea that love means giving space. But space, I learned, can also be cover. And she was using mine like a stage, playing the role of a loving wife at home, and something else entirely when the curtain closed. I had been her audience, nodding through scenes while she disappeared backstage with someone else. What hurt more than the lies was how easily she told them. No hesitation. No guilt. She spoke with the calm of someone who believed she deserved to be unfaithful, like the inconvenience of our marriage was something she was entitled to work around. I don't know when she stopped choosing me, but I know she did, long before that beach house booking. And I had spent too long blaming myself for the growing distance, trying to fix what only she had the power to shatter. But once Meredith and I had that talk at the cafe, the fog cleared. I realized how rehearsed the whole thing had become. Darren had clearly done this before. Meredith told me about the strange charges, the weekends he worked late, the gym bag he started taking even on his days off. We began mapping out their timelines, my wife's absences, his disappearances, and they lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. They had a pattern. They had a rhythm. And it had been going on longer than either of us wanted to admit. I remember the moment we decided to confront them, not with drama or chaos, but with something far worse for liars, exposure. Meredith and I agreed we'd both be there when they arrived at the house. We wouldn't hide. We wouldn't jump out shouting. We'd simply be there, waiting, faces calm, eyes unflinching, the truth heavy in the room before a single word was said. They had stolen time, trust, and space that wasn't theirs. Now we would take it back in silence. The drive to the beach house felt surreal. Meredith rode with me. We didn't talk much, just the occasional glance, the quiet nods of two people who had nothing left to lose. I handed her a spare key before we arrived, told her about the hidden camera I had disabled to give them privacy, and how I had changed the locks just days before. They'd still think their code worked. They'd walk in feeling clever, safe. They had no idea. We arrived 2 hours before check-in and unpacked nothing. We weren't there for leisure. We were there for truth. I made coffee. She sat at the kitchen bar, staring at the door. Outside, the waves rolled in slow and steady, like they knew what was coming. I stood by the living room window, remembering the nights my wife and I used to sit out there drinking wine, pretending we were still in love. But even those memories felt like fiction now, overwritten by betrayal. Every minute that passed built the tension between us like a quiet hum. We weren't nervous. We were prepared. The hardest part was already over. We'd seen them for who they truly were. Now we were simply giving them the chance to see us one last time, not broken, not furious, but united. Just before sunset, a car pulled up the drive. A sleek, rented convertible. How fitting. They stepped out laughing. She was wearing that sundress I once bought her for our anniversary, back when I still believed in us. He wore aviators in arrogance, his hand resting on her lower back like he owned her. They walked toward the house, luggage in hand, unaware. The moment was almost cinematic, a perfect lie on the edge of unraveling. And we were inside, waiting exactly where they thought they'd never find us. We didn't need theatrics. That was the beauty of it. Meredith and I both understood from the start, if we wanted to truly make them feel what they did to us, we wouldn't yell, break things, or cry. No, that would have let them twist the story, claim we were overreacting or unstable. What we needed was precision. Cold, calm clarity. Betrayal thrives in confusion. Exposure, though? That only needs light and the right timing. That weekend, we planned to give them both. Nothing fancy. Just 2 seats in the living room, 2 witnesses, and the silence of a house that knew the truth long before they did. I spent the day before we arrived preparing the place, not with decorations or any sign of warmth, but with intention. I moved 2 chairs directly across from the door, placed them side by side like a jury panel waiting for opening statements. I set a small table between us with nothing on it but 2 phones, ours, ready to record if needed. Not for public revenge, not to humiliate, but for memory, for proof, for ourselves. So that when the moment came, we wouldn't flinch. We'd be reminded exactly why we were doing this. Meredith arrived an hour after me, dressed in jeans and a plain gray sweater, her hair tied back like she had no time for pretense. She carried no bags, just a notebook in her hand with dates, receipts, and notes she had jotted down after our last talk. I had to admit, I respected her. Not many people could look betrayal in the eye and stay that composed. She was sharp, deliberate. If I'd met her in any other context, I might have thought she was a lawyer. In a way, she was building a quiet case against the man who had taken her for a fool. We sat together and reviewed the timeline. Her entries matched mine like puzzle pieces, weekends when my wife had emergencies, the days Darren had conference calls that oddly fell outside of any business hour. We could almost hear their excuses echoing in stereo. It's just work. You're being dramatic. Don't you trust me? And how strange that all those phrases, so heavy with guilt, now felt so small in the face of what was coming. Meredith closed her notebook and looked at me. You sure you're ready for this? I was ready the second they decided we were too stupid to see it. She nodded. Then let's not give them a single thing they can twist. We kept the lights dim, not dark. Just enough to keep the mood neutral. We didn't hide, didn't crouch behind doors or wait for them to get comfortable before revealing ourselves. That wasn't the point. The point was to greet them like hosts, polite, unmoved, and entirely in control. Because when you catch someone in the middle of their lie, and you don't scream, you win. You make them confront the truth with nothing to shield them. No argument, no distractions. Just the raw moment they realize they're not in charge anymore. The simplicity of it all made it powerful. We both sat quietly, waiting. Meredith sipped tea from a mug I'd left clean in the cupboard. I stared at the door, not anxious, not eager, just patient. Because I knew they were on their way. I'd seen her last message. Made it through traffic. Be there in 20. She didn't know that message was forwarded to the account I had synced to her phone back when we still shared everything. She thought she was clever. Private. She wasn't. She'd been living in a house of mirrors, and tonight, we'd finally show her the reflection. As the time ticked closer, Meredith spoke again, calm, measured. What do you think she'll say? She'll deny it first. Then get angry. Then maybe cry. And him. I smiled slightly. He'll blame her. Cowards always do. We heard the tires on the gravel first. That slow, careless confidence of someone who believed they were sneaking away to something beautiful. The sound of the car door slamming. Laughter. Footsteps. I could even hear the wheels of her suitcase brushing against the deck boards. Familiar boards I had stained with my own hands 2 summers ago. She used to love that sound. Said it meant she could finally breathe. I wondered if she'd still feel that way when she saw who was waiting inside. Then came the key code. For beeps. Pause. The lock clicked. And the door opened. They stepped in like it was any other vacation. She was smiling, holding a bottle of wine. He was behind her, arm slung casually over his shoulder, duffel bag in hand. Her heels echoed on the tile as she walked forward, and then froze. Just for a second. Just long enough for her brain to register that something was wrong. The lights were on. The chairs were facing the entrance. And we were sitting in them, waiting. Darren entered a beat later, unaware at first. Then his eyes found Meredith, and they widened like a man stepping off a ledge he didn't know was there. For a moment, no one said anything. For people. 1 room. No excuses. No confusion. Just 2 people standing in a place they had no right to be, and 2 who had come to remind them of exactly that. I didn't move. Meredith didn't blink. And they, finally, had nothing to say. There are moments you prepare for. Rehearse in your mind 1,000 times. What you'll say, how you'll sit, how it'll feel when the truth finally stares back at the ones who thought they were smarter than silence. But nothing, not even planning it all to the last second, could truly capture the look on her face when she saw me sitting there. My wife, the woman I once built dreams with, shared plans with, defended in rooms she wasn't even in. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. Her eyes darted from me to Meredith, and then to Darren, who was still standing in the doorway, as if moving forward would somehow make things worse. It was almost poetic, how suddenly small they both looked. Just minutes earlier, I'm sure they were laughing in that car, thinking they'd pulled it off again, one more weekend of pretending we didn't exist. But now, there they stood, caught not in a scream or a fist fight, but in something far heavier, silence. The kind of silence that doesn't wait for explanation. The kind that strips away every excuse before it's spoken. My wife clutched the wine bottle tighter. Maybe out of nerves. Maybe because her hands needed something to hold that wasn't a lie. Meredith leaned forward slightly. Her voice was the first to break the air. You can put that down. This isn't a party. Darren blinked like he hadn't heard her. Meredith, no, she interrupted, cool and steady. You don't speak first. Not this time. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at him. My eyes were on my wife, and hers were on the floor now, refusing to meet mine. The power shifted in the room in those few seconds. It wasn't rage or revenge or even confrontation. It was clarity. And that's what made it hit harder than anything we could have shouted. They were looking at two people who weren't broken or begging. We were done. And they knew it. My voice was quiet, flat. You used my house to cheat on me. You used my money to book it. You used our calendar to block out family time, and this is what that meant to you. She finally spoke, voice trembling. I can explain. I tilted my head slightly. Please. Try. She took a step forward, then stopped. She realized there was nowhere to go in that house where the truth wouldn't follow. It wasn't what it looks like, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Meredith laughed once, a sharp, joyless sound. You're standing in his house with your lover, and we're sitting here waiting for you. If that's not what it looks like, you might need a dictionary. Darren tried again, stepping forward this time. I didn't know, he never said. You didn't know this was his house? I asked. You've been here before, haven't you? He hesitated, then nodded once, shame dragging at his features. She said it was vacant. Said you weren't using it. She said a lot of things, I replied. And you believed all of them. He looked at Meredith then, reaching for some lifeline. I swear I didn't mean to hurt you. This just happened. No, she said, her voice steel. You chose it. Every text, every lie, every time you stood in this house and didn't think about me, you chose this. The room pulsed with stillness. You could feel the weight of their realization crashing down in real time. They had no place to hide, not here. And for once, they couldn't run. They couldn't claim victimhood, couldn't twist the narrative. Everything was laid bare for people in a beach house, too betrayed, too exposed. And not a single tear had fallen. Not yet. My wife finally set the wine down. Her hands were shaking. I didn't think it would go this far, she murmured. That made me laugh, but there was no humor in it. You didn't think using your husband's property to sneak around with another man was going to go this far? You didn't think lying for months would eventually hit a wall? She closed her eyes. I'm sorry. No, I said, rising from my seat. You're just caught. There's a difference. Meredith stood too. We didn't need to say more. There was nothing left to prove, nothing they could say that would make the cracks disappear. They looked smaller now, the two of them, embarrassed, exposed, powerless. I almost pitied them. Almost. We'll give you 10 minutes, I said, walking toward the hallway. Pack your things. Leave the key on the counter. You're kicking us out? Darren asked, disbelief creeping in. No, I said, without even looking at him. I'm letting you walk out. That's the nicest thing you're getting tonight. And with that, Meredith and I left the living room. We didn't wait for their replies. We didn't need closure. We already had it, served not in vengeance, but in full control. We didn't go far, just down the hall into the guest room, doors slightly ajar. Not to hide, but to give them space to understand exactly what they had done and exactly who was still in charge. I heard them whispering, heard her trying to steady her voice, heard the soft creak of the couch as she sat down, probably hoping to plead her way out of the mess. but nothing she said could reach where I was anymore. She didn't realize it yet, but I had already let her go the moment she chose deception over honesty, fantasy over fidelity. What came next wasn't for closure, it was for truth. 10 minutes passed. We gave them 15. Then we stepped back into the room. They hadn't packed. The suitcase still sat by the door, untouched. Darren stood with his arms crossed, like he had grown tired of pretending he was sorry. And her? She sat with that same rehearsed guilt in her eyes, the kind that isn't real. It's just fear of consequences. She looked up as we entered, clearly hoping the passage of time had softened us. It hadn't. You didn't leave, I said flatly. We wanted to talk, she replied quickly. Please, just listen. I stayed standing. So did Meredith. Neither of us was interested in sitting again. Talk, I said. But don't lie. Not this time. Her voice wavered. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It started as comfort. I felt alone. You were always working, always distracted. I held up a hand. Stop. Don't rewrite the story. You weren't alone. You were bored. That's a different thing. She flinched. Meredith stepped forward now, her expression unreadable. And you? She asked Darren. You were what? Just conveniently in love with a married woman who offered you someone else's life for the weekend? Darren didn't respond at first. When he did, his tone was defensive. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. That line's older than both our marriages combined, I said coldly. You got caught, not cornered by accident. He looked at me then. Really looked. So what now? You gonna ruin us? Tell everyone. I almost laughed. That's what he was afraid of, his reputation. Not the betrayal. Not the damage to 2 homes, 2 lives. Just the fallout. The optics. I'm not here to ruin you, I said. You did that yourself. But you won't be staying here another night. You'll leave, quietly, with whatever self-respect you can still find. And you won't contact either of us again. And if I do? He asked, stepping forward slightly. That's when Meredith moved. She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten. She simply pulled a folder from her bag and set it on the table between them. These are transcripts, screenshots, timestamps, financials, everything. Not for the world. Just in case you forget who you cheated on and who's now in control of your house, your future, and your access to a clean divorce. His face blanched. You've been gathering this? He asked, stunned. For months, she replied. Because I stopped trusting your words long before I met him. He sat back down. My wife, no, the woman I used to believe was mine, just stared at me now. Her eyes said more than her mouth ever could. Regret. Panic. Shame. I didn't need an apology. I didn't even need a confession. I already had the truth. I just needed to say one last thing, to make sure there would be no misunderstanding moving forward. I built this house for us, I said, voice low but clear. I worked overtime, missed vacations, skipped nights out to give you this view, these walls, this escape. And you turned it into a hideaway for a lie. So now it's mine again. All of it. You won't sleep here. You won't even step on the porch unless invited. And trust me, you won't be. She swallowed hard. What about us? There is no us, I replied. You ended us the moment you decided I was easier to lie to than love. The room was quiet again. Not the heavy silence of tension, but the final breath of a truth being laid to rest. Meredith and I didn't say another word. We turned and walked toward the door, hearing the scramble behind us, the rustle of bags being opened, the urgent whispers of 2 people who had finally realized they were not in control. We stood outside for a few minutes, watching the last orange streaks of sunset dip behind the water. The same sun that used to mark new memories now felt like it was finally closing the book. I'm proud of us, Meredith said quietly. Me too, I replied. Because confrontation doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, the quietest moments carry the deepest echoes. They left just after dark, heads down, luggage clumsily dragged across the gravel. I didn't watch them drive off. I didn't need to. Some goodbyes speak louder when they aren't acknowledged. Meredith and I stayed behind a while longer, not out of necessity but closure. We sat in silence on the back deck, 2 people who hadn't planned to know each other, now bound by the same scar. There was no celebration, no sense of victory, just peace. A quiet understanding that we had taken back something that was stolen, not just property, but dignity, clarity, and choice. When she finally stood to leave, Meredith looked back at the house one last time. He used to talk about this place like it was magic, she said. Turns out the only magic here tonight was the way we held our ground. I nodded, walking her to her car. Thank you for standing with me. Thank you for calling me, she said. Next time I come here, I hope it's to visit, not to witness. We shook hands, not out of formality, but respect. And then she was gone. I stood there for a moment longer, under the soft hum of the porch light. Then I walked back inside and locked the door behind me, not just physically, but emotionally. I locked it on them, on the versions of us that had once pretended to be happy, on the weight of months spent doubting myself. I walked into every room they had passed through and reclaimed it, not by rearranging the furniture or throwing things out, but by simply being there, by breathing freely, by not needing anyone else's permission to feel safe in my own space. The next morning, I called the locksmith, changed the codes, changed the locks, changed the name on the utilities, even though they had always been mine, because this time I wanted nothing in her name. No remnants, no loopholes. She texted twice. I read the previews on the lock screen, but never opened them. One said, "Can we talk?" The other said, "Please don't make this harder than it already is." As if she hadn't spent months making it harder than it ever needed to be. I didn't block her. I didn't respond. I just let the silence speak where words never had. In the weeks that followed, everything moved fast. Lawyers, separation filings, asset division. But the beach house? That was never up for debate. It was legally mine, solely in my name since day one. And while she tried to negotiate visitation, yes, she actually called it that, I didn't entertain the idea. You don't visit something you tried to destroy, I told my attorney. You leave it alone. And she did. The house returned to being mine. Fully. Quietly. And I began using it again, not to escape, but to rebuild. I took time off work and came out here alone. Cooked meals for one. Read books I'd forgotten I owned. Played music without lyrics and listened to the ocean more than the world. The silence that used to scare me became something else, something sacred. It reminded me that I wasn't broken. I was just buried under someone else's story for too long. Now, I had space to write my own again. Sometimes, neighbors asked where she was. I said we had gone our separate ways. That was enough. The truth didn't need to be retold. It had already been lived, and that was punishment enough. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't need to see her suffer. She had to wake up every day knowing what she threw away. That was her burden. Mine was lighter now. Months later, I returned to the beach house with someone new. Not a lover, not yet, but a friend who saw me clearly, who listened without trying to fix me. She asked if this place held bad memories. I smiled and said, it used to. Then I poured us both coffee, opened the doors to the sea breeze, and let the house breathe again. It didn't feel tainted anymore. It felt reclaimed. It felt honest. That's the thing about betrayal. It tries to steal your sense of place. But when you face it without fear, without stooping to the level of liars, you get to keep more than the furniture or the deed. You get to keep your peace, your clarity, your story. The house stays mine. So does the silence. So does the strength. If this story kept you listening to the very end, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Stories by Mr. Best. Your support helps us bring more real, raw, and unforgettable moments to life. And if you've ever faced betrayal and kept your silence, this space is for you.